Welcome to episode number 47 of Life Without Cravings. This week, I'm going to share with you a recording from a Facebook Live that I did earlier this week. I didn't think about putting it out as my weekly episode, but I thought it was a really good one and I want to share with you. If you're watching this on YouTube, I hope you will excuse the video quality because I didn't record it separately. What we're talking about though is how to not let your addiction define you and your success, because this is a huge thing that I see everywhere and it's really getting in the way of you having the life that you want. So without further ado, let's have a look at that recording. The topic is: don't let your addiction define you and your success. They go hand in hand, right? So in terms of addiction, I use this term quite lightly because I know that it's all about how you perceive your problem. Some people might say, I'm not really addicted, I just have a really bad habit. It's fine. It's the same sort of brain pathway. It's just that an addiction has other things coming with it that we have developed over time. And this is just one of the saddest things that I see, even among people that have actually overcome their carb addiction. At least that's what they say. They still let their addiction define who they are as people. And with that, I mean that they identify as a carb addict and they believe that an addiction, any addiction, carb addiction, whatever addiction it is, they believe this classical once an addict, always an addict. And therefore, they literally putting themselves in a mental cage. It's like they believe that in order to be successful at never, binging again or whatever, at just quitting the carbs, they need to be 100% abstinent. Not a single crumb of their problem food can touch their lips or cross their lips, because that means that they're having a relapse. And that is the typical black and white thinking that I always bring up, which ultimately are going to set you up for failure. It does that every single time. So what instead if this simply is not true? Imagine that everyone is born as a blank canvas. There is nothing there. It's a blank canvas and we get to do whatever we want to do with it. Our experiences when we're growing up, they form our beliefs and our habits. So certain foods, especially the processed carbs, etc., are naturally going to be favored because they release chemicals that makes you feel good. And our brains they have evolved to respond to these chemicals and make something of it. It's not the conscious mind that is doing this. This is just all like the primal stuff. So it's designed to function in the response to these chemicals. And if we get a lot of feel-good chemicals released, we're going to want to do more of it, right? Now, the way that you learn anything is through neural connections. So the more you do something, the more neural connections you're going to form in your brain. And that's how we are getting better at things. That's how we develop a skill. That's how we learn things. It's just all about the connections, right? So the more you practice, the better you're going to get at it. So in terms of carb addiction, it's only natural that we do get a reward signal for eating carbs. But what is not natural is to get a huge reward signal, because we are eating huge amount of processed carbs, which we would not be able to do if they were all natural. Yes, we can eat mashed potatoes or whatever, and that would give us, a fair whack of carbs. But it's nothing compared to, downing a pizza and chips and whatever we are eating, a bag of Skittles, I'm just making some shit up. It's nothing if you are looking at that perspective. So the reward signal that you get is completely unnatural. The brain is not set up for handling this much of a reward. And that's how we start developing the addiction, which I've talked about many times before. So I'm not going to go into that. But that fuels the process of also building more neural connections quicker. So the more reward we're getting, the quicker your brain is going to learn something, because it's going to think that it's really, really important that we get more of this. And so eating these foods, it's usually very quickly turning into a habit, which then can develop into an addiction. Now, this is what I want you to keep in mind. This is the important part. The brain is plastic, which means that the brain has the ability to change and adapt throughout a person's life. And it doesn't matter how old you are. Yes, little children, they learn very quickly. Their brains are super plastic. They're meant to be that way because they are growing and they're learning, and they need to learn the life skills and develop into little human beings that actually have knowledge and habits and, all of the things. So they need their brains to do this quickly. Adults don't need. And the neural connections that you have can either be maintained, they can be built upon, or they can be pruned away, right? Now, if you don't use something, you lose it. So this goes for a carb addiction as well. If you're not using the neural pathway that leads to the eating of the carbs, those connections are going to start being pruned away. And what you're doing instead is now a new neural connection, or a new neural pathway, because you're now doing something different. And this is going to feel very odd and strange in the beginning because you're not used to doing it. But you're slowly building more and more connections and making this neural pathway stronger. So what this actually means, now remember this, is that you can train your brain out of being addicted to food. I'm going to say it again, and my screen is blinking. I hope I don't have connection issues. So you can train your brain out of an addiction. And this is something that people don't seem to understand. I can scream myself blue in the face, and people still don't get it. They're so set on, I can't do it. And I want you to realize that you can do it. It's not going to be instant. There's work involved in it, but you can do it. And as I said, it doesn't happen as quickly in adults as it does in children. But that also means that children can get addicted very quickly as well. Why do you think we have screaming toddlers when they don't get their sweets when in the supermarket? They just want everything that they know feels nice. That's why if I had a child, I wouldn't even feed them sugar, because I know how it's going to affect their brains. So that's why the saying that once an addict, always an addict, is wrong. It's completely wrong. And I want you to really get it into your head. It's wrong. That's not true. Even if it feels like it's true, it's dogma. It's something that you have been indoctrinated. And you are using your current evidence of your failures to back that up. So every time you fail, you're like, oh yeah, it's right. I cannot do it. But that's only because you have never tried to rewire your brain. Most people haven't. They don't know that they can do it. They don't know how to do it, and they don't know that they can do it. It's like me saying that if I fall into the water, I'm going to drown. But I have never taken the time to learn to swim. Of course I'm going to drown. So if you find yourself saying things like, I just can't be around carbs because I will just eat them all. That might be true right now. In this moment, that might be true. I'm not discounting that. But it's only true because you have not taken the time to learn something different. So you can learn to do it differently. Just as I can learn to swim so that I don't drown, you can learn to not give in to your cravings all the time if you take the time to do that. So it's not true just because you're a carb addict, and it's not true because you have never been able to do it before. None of that matters. You are a carb addict because you haven't paid attention to it. And you haven't been able to do it before because you haven't even tried, probably. You haven't tried the right thing to do. You have probably used a lot of willpower and tried it that way. So it doesn't mean that it's an absolute truth. It might be true right now, but that doesn't mean that it can't be changed. And that's what I want you to really know, that however true it is in this moment, you can choose to change it and choose to think that it is possible for you to actually change it. Because I don't think that there is a single functional human brain on earth that cannot learn this skill. So, I mean, I'm proof of it. I've helped a lot of people that have done it as well. They are living proof of it. But it's a process and you need to keep practicing. And it's a deliberate practice where you need to be very specific with what it is that you're trying to change. So it might be that, okay, I'm just not going to give in to my cravings. So that's what I want to practice. Or it might be that you're just a general overeater. So maybe you just want to practice to stop eating when you're feeling full. Or even in the beginning, maybe pay attention to when you're feeling full, because maybe you're not even connecting with your body. Whatever it is, you need to start paying attention to it and put that practice in there on purpose, but with one focus. Don't try to focus on all the things at once, because that usually leads to disaster. And the beautiful thing with that is that when you do that, when you are able to just focus on one thing and get some traction in that area, it usually spreads to other areas as well that you have problems with. So let's say that you're focusing on not giving into your cravings or whatever you want to do. What's going to happen is that over time, the new neural pathway will develop, and it's going to be as effortless to not give in to cravings, because you won't even feel the cravings the same way anymore, as it currently is to just stuff your face with stuff. That can happen. It does not have to be hard, but it does take a little bit of deliberate practice to get there. So when you know that all of that is possible, you can never, in good conscience, ever again say things like, I need to be 100% abstinent because I'm a sugar addict. Because it's not true, and you know it. The worst thing when I learned how to do this for me was still wanting to eat a lot of sugar at the same time as I knew how to not do it. So whenever I would go and buy something, I was so aware of it that I started to judge myself for it. But that's just the first step, and not everyone goes through that step. I believe that I'm probably not the worst food or sugar addict on earth, but I was pretty much up there. I know a lot of people have it easier. I know a lot of people have it a lot harder than I had, but that's one of the things that I was struggling with a lot. So just if you know in your bones that this is possible, I can change this, you can never ever say such a thing again and feel like this is true. You're going to be onto yourself. You're going to catch yourself in this lie. And like, interesting. Why do I keep telling myself this? Because it's not true, right? Now, you can choose to be abstinent for the rest of your life if you like, or you can choose not to be. But if you choose to be abstinent, isn't it better to choose to be abstinent because you want to rather than because you have to? Because your addiction is no longer an addiction after you have been reprogramming your brain. That's how you can choose to just not do it, because you don't want to eat those foods. Not because I cannot do it or I'm going to relapse. It's a really bad place to be in, I think. It's not as bad as actually being in the addiction, but I don't think that's freedom. Because the old addiction is that it's just like an unused neural pathway. And you can choose to activate it again by doing the same things that you used to do in the past, and then you will be back in your addiction, and that is a relapse. But why would you? Once you learned how to do this, it's really easy to just go back to that, because now you have two neural pathways You get to choose, and you can always choose whichever you want. So, having said that, if you don't want to be 100% abstinent, if you want to eat some carbs, problem foods, whatever you want to call them, every now and then, you can do that in a way that is safe and will not trigger your addiction again. You can still eat those foods if you want to for whatever reason, and you don't have to be afraid of it. If you want to eat them because you have a hang up on, oh my God, I can't quit it, I need to have it, it's so good, that is the addiction pathway. I don't want you to eat things when you're coming from that place. But I have one client right now. She wants to eat it because certain holidays, it's a social thing. It's something that she wants to do, but not for the eating of it. And then that is fine, because that's a different pathway. I hope you get how this is kind of coming together. So your brain might not be a blank canvas anymore. You've been doodling on it your whole life. But that doesn't mean that there is no space for more doodling. And remember, we have this eraser. We can just start erasing things that are not helpful. We can erase anything that we don't like, and then just make space for things that we do like, things that we think are going to help us quitting. And I don't believe that this is any harder to do than just going cold turkey and then just forcing yourself to avoid the carbs. That is a different hard. It's a hard that you have probably tried and done several times, and it feels more comfortable because you have. But also, how successful have you been? Probably not very, because then you wouldn't be in here. You wouldn't have an interest in watching what I'm talking about. And I think that is causing so much more pain, actually. It's causing a lot of pain, it's causing a lot of grief, because there is no freedom in that. It's always, I don't know, it's going to make you like we don't like being told that we can't do things. It's going to make you feel really rebellious. At least that's what my brain is doing, and what I usually see in other people. Because when you think that I can never have that again, because then I'm going to fall off, you're going to be like, but I want it, and we just focus on that. And if that's the road you want to go down, if that's what you want to do, kudos to you, do it. But I would really recommend that you retrain your brain instead. It's a much more fail-proof way of being, and a much more relaxed way of being. Because when you no longer want it, you're not going to miss it. And if you don't miss it, there is nothing to rebel against. It's like we're just removing the whole component of the addiction. So it's like a non-issue. And it just gets to be easy. But to get to the easy part, there is an amount of work that you will have to do first. And the work is very simple, it's very doable. It's anyone with a functional human brain can do it. And the doing of it is rarely the problem. It's not like someone cannot do it because it's complicated. The problem is all the drama and the bullshit that your brain is making up to prevent you from doing the work. So the next time you think that you can't do it, like smack yourself on the fingers, your brain fingers, that is. Do a reality check and just change the sentence, like, I can't do it, change it to, I can learn how to do it. Or I am learning how to do it. Or I'm figuring out how to do it. Whatever you want. But don't lock yourself into this black and white thing, like, I can't do it. Because when you tell yourself that you can't do it, there is no escape from there. It's like, if I can't, I can't. There's no point in even trying. So don't do that to yourself. It's completely unnecessary. And it's just setting you up for trouble. So I hope that's helpful. Please do comment, even if you watch this on replay, comment. Give me your biggest takeaway. What have you heard me say that you feel like this is something that I haven't thought about, or that is going to help me, something that you're going to try maybe? Leave me a comment. Comments are good. And another thing, keep your eyes out for my new challenge, which will be starting in the second week of July. I will post about it. I will send out some invitations to join in early July. So don't miss that if you want my support in rewiring your brain.